sitting, I think we do have many problems, and I can rank three of them. Infant maternal mortality, food, and third, energy. The first two somehow are all, the solution to them somehow depend on the energy. For Ghana, the energy crisis has become almost a festival. We celebrate it, it comes, we mumble through it, and then by some miracle we survive it, and we forget all about it, only to revisit it or to be visited upon us again 5-8 years down the road. So we're becoming a little bit experienced in how to cope with energy type of crisis. Very quickly, in terms of the impact, the data is very sobering. How the recent crisis affected us. Imagine this: GDP growth descended rapidly from 8.8% in 2012 down to 3.4% in 2016. The economy is estimated to have lost within 5 years to the tune of $24 billion, all due to the energy crisis. On a daily basis, the country was estimated to be losing close to 2.2 million. Business sales were falling by almost 35% annually. Job losses were incalculable. The quality of life is a different story. You can imagine how health sector suffered. So Ghana has paid a very heavy price over the past 4 years due to the energy problems. And meanwhile, we continue to talk about transformation, forgetting that there's a lot in our modern economy that cannot be said, that cannot be done if your energy problems become so pervasive. Think of all the financial sector innovations, the innovations in products, innovations in processes, the use of mobile money, banking technology, all of those things will come to a halt if there is no energy supporting this. The increasing penetration of technology in all that we do in our everyday activities, not to mention manufacturing and industry, are all hinged on the energy. And so even as we plan this industrialization process, somewhere at the back of our minds, we forget that a lot of this just cannot happen without having the energy aspect solved. Food security, food safety, health sector, the safety of drugs that must be maintained are all hinging on the way that the availability of energy. There have been some very horrible cases in Ghana where death in hospitals have been attributed to the unpredictable supply of energy, and you do not wish to be on the operating bed under those circumstances. So we face a lot of challenges, and it's been very costly, both in human terms, production, economic growth terms, and I think the conversation this time is moving to a different level. The challenges, there are several of them, and I believe they are very common challenges, even as I read the Nigerian country profile. We like to think of adequate supply of energy, reliable supply of energy, and then we add affordability of energy. Well, how affordable should it be? Adequacy and reliability, to me, are the key elements of our energy conversation. if they are adequate and they are reliable, it's now a matter of willingness to pay. And if you're willing to pay, I think that's what big industry move forward. Going forward, what are the lessons and what should all of us be thinking about? For deep-seated transformation, we require progressive steps. It cannot be and should not be business as usual. Let me start from the national level, and I think all of you can play at the back of your mind your country experience. One, the challenge of the ownership structure of the industry. Many countries have attempted unbundling generation from transmission to distribution. The only problem is that we've given it a half-hearted solution. A lot of unbundling remains incomplete. We just thought by establishing institutions to do 1, 2, 3, the story is done. We haven't done. So therefore, the process of unbundling generations from transmission to distributions must be carried through to its logical end. So second will be the regulatory mechanisms. We speak in passing about strengthening regulatory mechanisms. Well, we now have to, in the language that some of us understand, we need to double click on this whole regulatory mechanism to discuss the elements of the regulatory mechanism. It is not sufficient just to pass a law. It's not sufficient to establish an institution. You need to go further. The capacity and the instruments of regulations. We tend to forget these things. There's a common problem of pricing. And there are two types of pricing problems. One is pricing on the demand side, and then pricing on the generating side. Many African countries, the costs of electricity to end use are very high. And we do two things. We overprice, and therefore there are affordability issues. We overprice to end users, and then we underprice for the power tariffs. So the incentive to generate is not there, and we penalize end users simply because between generation and distribution, there's a high inefficiency costs, transmission losses in many of these countries. And somehow government uses its muscle to make sure that you and I pay for the inefficiency losses without holding management of our electricity, energy institutions to account. With that kind of tariff underpricing, there is hardly any incentive for investment. You need that kind adequate pricing to invite the independent power producers to come in. So at the national level, I think this is the least that could be done. But that is not sufficient. Our countries are very small markets. Electricity is bulky, indivisible, and requires huge plans for substantial economies of scale. Which brings us to the next conversation we must have. That is the regional conversation. There are many of these so-called common public utility things that the conversation at the national level is no longer interesting. The conversation must move with determination to the regional level platform. Coordination of supply, the supply mix of the energy, large markets attract large investments, and all the economies of efficiency, scale, and product become very beneficial to all of us. Conversations about regional power pools, I think, are very important for us. Finally, what does politics have to do for this? But politics does matter. In the ECOWAS, for example, the West African Power Pool, if you go through the literature to read about them, you will find that the issues are recurrent, nothing new. Why? Because after all the protocols, after all the agreements have done, the will to carry through these things, the political will to move this through, somehow by the time our politicians and policymakers jet back home, they forget what is to be done and we do not carry through. So strong political will is a key fundamental aspect if we are to continue to make sense of any deep-seated transformation conversation, whether it is through natural resource value addition, whether it is in agro-processing, and whichever aspect of the economy that we need to speak to, without the will to see the necessity of this. It is no longer a luxury, it's a necessity for us. Clusters of energy platform, first on regional basis and not too far down the road, even a continental basis, to have these type of conversations rather than sticking the conversations to more national boundaries. So we have a problem and we need the energy, so to speak, in order to tackle them. It can be done.